God loves you infinitely. Marlene Dietrich. Now, if you're a younger person, you've probably never heard this name. If you've been around a little bit and halfway deal with look at classic theater, maybe you understand what this is. But she began performing in Berlin. Again, Dietrich is a good German name, in the 1920s. She became a U.S. citizen in 1937, and at the height of her fame was making about $200,000 a film. Now, that's about $3 million today. It's a lot of money. Again, and she was making quite a few a year. Very, very, extremely wealthy at the time. Yet all of her fame and all of her fortune, with all of these great things, she was extremely conflicted. Her life was never at peace. When she invited guests over, and she did quite often, she would play recorded ovations of the audiences at her performances. She would say, Jesse, sit down in this chair and I'm going to play something great for you. It's going to be good. And all you would hear is ovation. You wouldn't hear music. You wouldn't hear her speaking. You wouldn't hear the play itself or the movie. Just the applause. This is a conflicted soul. Guests were often equally famous, if not more famous than she was, making more money, and yet she would force them to sit and listen to the applause given to her by some arbitrary group at some time. During her one marriage, and again I can understand why it was one and it was short, she forced her husband to read the love letters that other men wrote to her. That'd make it short, wouldn't it? Had enough of this. Got to get this lady figured out. You understand, I mean, I'm sure those people get lots and lots of letters like that. She doesn't mean she had to have indulged in them. But she forced her husband to read through them because she loved the ovation. She loved the applause. She loved people loving her. Again, her spotlight ended around 1975 in Sydney, Australia, when she fell from a stage and broke her thigh. At that point, she was addicted to alcohol and painkillers and lived her final years alone in seclusion in a Paris apartment where she would only have a couple chosen people to visit her once in a while. And even at that point, she would put the records on and listen to the applause of what she once was. Or when the people truly loved her, they loved her. They loved her so much. Again, this is an extreme situation, but I think all of us are there. Her search for approval was amplified by her public visibility. But there was nothing unique about it. Humans are relational beings. We want people to like us. It's built in for the desire of approval. We want to kind of fit in and be with everyone else. We don't want to stand alone. Once in a while, there's a few of you that are just those renegades, and you're fine on your own. But most of us are content just kind of being in the school of fish. You know, you don't want to be that one fish because you're the one picked off. You want to be in the middle somewhere where no one can get to you. Again, you look at it, how many are very much different than Marlena today? You look at Facebook. Again, I watch a show called Diesel Brothers once in a while on History or Discovery Channel or something like that. And their whole thing is to build these huge diesels, the one like Jesse had stolen, huge trucks that are this high off the ground. But they will do these crazy things, and they get a lot of money by YouTube. They make these crazy videos doing crazy things. But they're doing pretty well. They make good money at it. But you look at all the crazy things that maybe you have done, or your children, or your grandchildren have done to get attention. Again, texting is not necessarily your best thing with the ability to put pictures from any phone at any point showing anything you want to show. And you can take that to extreme wherever you want to go with that. But you understand that really nothing's private anymore with the concept of Facebook. Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be noticed. How do I get seen today? What crazy thing? How do I have to hurt myself that becomes the funniest video out there? It's just masochistic. It's extremely dangerous. God's never wanted us to be that kind of a people. The Bible considers this, the concept of the fear of rejection, essentially the fear of man. Again, if you look at it that way, it makes us look really weak, doesn't it? It's not that we want approval. We fear man. You're afraid of your fellow man. You're afraid of the group. And this may be you. You may be one of these people. Again, it's more than a fright. It's any kind of awe and reverence that causes us to subject ourselves to something or someone else. Let's see if we can work through this a little bit and understand the concept. Maybe we can grasp it and throw it behind us. We're in the book of Matthew, so open up there, about 65-70% through your Bible. Book of Matthew, great, great book. Written by Matthew, son of Alphaeus. He was a tax collector. It's neat to see, last week we talked about it in class, but it's neat to see the different kind of people that Jesus had as disciples. He had a tax collector who would have worked with Rome, and then he had a zealot who would have done crazy things to any Jew who associated with Rome. Again, all of these different people, Simon the Zealot and Matthew, I would have loved to have seen their conversations. That would have been all kinds of interesting to watch. But Jesus uses all kinds of people. This book is written somewhere around AD 62. You have to remember it's a Jewish book. It's written by a Jew, to Jews, about a Jew. So you have to kind of get into the Jewish mindset when you read through it, or you'll disregard all of the wealth that's in the book, like the genealogies and the names and the lists. All those are important. Again, it was written to proclaim the words and works of Jesus so that people can intellectually make a decision for him. I don't want you necessarily always just to make your decision right here, because just as soon as you're emotionally driven another way, you'll forget it. I want you to understand and then it to affect you internally and deeply. Therefore, you'll be changed. We're in Matthew 26. You're going to be kind of surprised when I go here, but I think it's a good example of a little bit of peer pressure. Everybody stand with me, if you would, as we honor God's word. Matthew 26, verses 69 and the next few. Here we go. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant approached him, and she said, "You were with Jesus the Galilean, weren't you?" But he denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about." When when he had gone out the gate, another woman saw him and told him, "You were there. This man was with Jesus the Nazarene." And again he denied it with an oath. "I don't know that man." After a little while, those standing there approached and said to Peter, "This guy can't get a break. You certainly are one of them, since your accent gives you away." Then he started to curse and to swear and to have an oath. "I don't know this man at all." Immediately a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. Let's pray. Dear Lord, you're good. I thank you for your word, Lord, and I thank you that you even show the failures that we can learn from them. Thank you for Peter. Didn't want him to go through that, Lord, but thank you that we can understand what it is to stand up for you and maybe not make the same mistakes. You're good. We say this in your name. Amen. Please be seated. Excuse me. A little bit of backstory. Let's kind of get to where we are. We are offered the fear of God as the key to life. That's essentially what we're to fear. Fear God. We don't fear man because there's nothing there to fear. The fear of God's a healthy fear. It's what he wants us to have. Yet we substitute the fear of man in its place, and all things tend to fall apart. They do. When we put God in his place, everything is lined up. It's beautiful. It just works out perfectly. When he tends to fall to the side in our lives, and we tend to put this as an importance, then all of us are in a mess, and every time we fall apart. We tend to disregard the things that God would have, and we go the way of the world every time. You can look at your life. You know what you're doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And you know what's led you there. Andre Siu, she's a godly theologian, a woman. She said this, and it's a great, great quote. You have 1,000 masters instead of one to please. When we're talking about dealing with man and fearing man. You think fear of God's bad. It's nothing compared to the alternative. Fear of man is a cruel tyranny. It's exhausting, it's complicated, and you're not nimble enough to pull it off. You can't please everyone. The only person you're supposed to please is God himself. Everyone else doesn't matter, and if you do this well, it will all work out. It will every time. Solomon said it this way in the book of Proverbs 29. The fear of man is a snare, but the one who trusts in the Lord is protected. Where do you want to be? And I could probably stop it there if you just thought and internalize those words. We don't have to go any farther. We'll all go to lunch. But I'd like to get to the end of this and kind of see if I can lead you through it. Solomon considered one of the smartest people around, wisest at least. And that's what he said about it. And a snare is a trap. It's meant to capture an animal. Essentially, when we put God out here and we put man in his place, we've set the trap for ourselves. You know, again, you may be one of those who's a trapper and out there doing great things. Hopefully you've never got your own foot in the trap. You know, you see those big rope and you walk in there and you tuck it upside down or something like that. Or hopefully you didn't have a bear trap and it went right there around the ankles. Hopefully you're smart enough not to do that, but most of us trap ourselves when it comes to this. We will sacrifice our standards, our values, our priorities, or give up moral and spiritual ground to please these people over here who don't matter at all. Again, if the bait is an overpowering desire for approval, then we're drawn into the trap by doing whatever it takes to gain that approval. And again, you may think this just applies to your kid who's in grade school or high school, but no. It happens to all of us. There are plenty of examples in the Bible about this, of man seeking man's approval. Again, we've already talked about Peter. We're going to go there this morning. The first thing I want you to kind of understand about this, and we're going to flesh it out a little bit, the reality of the fear of disapproval. Let's talk about the reality of this. What really goes on to this? And let's talk about this story, and maybe you can kind of get a better sense of how ridiculous and how foolish it is to not just stick with the one standard that never changes. How many of you tried to reach and to meet the approval of the world, and they kept changing? It just shifts. Okay, I did that. Whoa, now they're over here. I better do this thing too. Whoa, they just got, whoa, where'd they go? You know what I'm saying? You can't do it. God is always the same. He loves you. He will never change his rules because he set them out from the beginning of time. We read the story earlier of Peter. Jesus was giving the Lord's Supper. Let's backtrack from the story a little bit. He was giving the Lord's Supper in the upper room. Remember, it was Passover time. He was making this beautiful Passover meal something of his own. And maybe at some point we'll see if we can have kind of a Seder meal and go through it. It's always a great experience. But he looks to Peter in this meal. He looks to Peter and says, "You're going to deny me." Can you imagine? It's supposed to be a happy time. We're having a good Passover meal here. Relaxing. It's family. We're all having a good time together. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times, buddy. That would really be a downer on the meal. Can you imagine how awful that would be? This is supposed to be the God of the universe, and I'm following him, and he knows everything. And he's saying this thing that would never happen about me. I'll never, ever, ever do it. Again, of course, what does Peter do? He denies the accusation. Matthew 26, "Even if I have to die with you," Peter told him, "I will never deny you." And all the disciples said this, "Oh yeah, we'll never deny you, Jesus. It's not going to happen. Don't talk about Peter like that. Peter's great. Peter will be the first to die for you." You can see it. We can put ourselves in that place. There are a lot of them, "Oh no, Peter never do that. Oh no." We know what that looks like. You could write the scene. Yet Jesus is proved correct, and Peter denies him 3 different times to 3 different people or groups of people. When we interact with people, our perceived standing with them affects our interaction. You understand that? You're going to act differently around the wealthy than you will the poor. Different around those with lots of degrees than those who aren't. And you're going to try to compare yourself to them and equal out who you are with reference to them. You may feel superior. You may feel inferior. Again, you know how you are. We need to get beyond it. In this church, hopefully that doesn't happen. We are one happy big family, whether we like each other or not. Okay? That's who we're going to be. It does not matter what you've done in the past, because that doesn't matter. God does not care about that. He cares how obedient you are. That's what elevates you, not your education, your background, your socioeconomic level. None of that matters. None of it matters. You may think you're equal with others, but you're always evaluating yourself in comparison to them, and you need to stop. God has made you with value, and you need to understand who you are. Our problem is we don't recognize who we are. We don't recognize the value. We only see the value that the world attributes to our life, and it's not going to give us much. Therefore, why I have the fear of failure, I'm always trying to attain. Okay? I have no trouble being honest with you. That's why I fight and I fight and I fight. To get something and to continue to gain so that I will have value. It's not really a peer pressure thing. I'm just fighting myself. That's who I fight. Again, these rankings that we put are imaginary, yet imaginary things tend to become real. Fear's not a real thing. Yet we make it real. Again, those that you perceive to have greater power, social class, wealth, ideology, or education are the most difficult group usually to deal with. On the night Jesus was arrested, Peter interacted with 3 different groups. Yet he failed with each one, and each one had a different dynamic to it. You would think one of them he would have gotten. I would hope that if there were not 8 people come to him, he would have failed all 8 times. But probably, because at this point he's just trying to fit in. Let's talk about the first one, the unexpected fear. He had an unexpected fear, and I think you'll understand once we get there. The first person Peter encountered was someone younger and in that day beneath his social standing. He deals with a slave girl. He was a man. He was a fisherman. He was a big and burly guy. Now she could have been a Swedish 6'5", 300-pounder. She could have, but probably not. She's probably a young slave girl at this point. So I'm going to go with that because the story sounds a little better. It's hard for me to play the other one off well. But look back at verse 69. Look at this. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant approached him, and she said, "You were with Jesus the Galilean too." Again, if you look at the John passage, it talks of her being a young maiden, a young servant girl. So we can go with that. Peter was a blue-collar fisherman, and he was above this girl in standing. A young girl did not talk to a man. A woman didn't talk to a man unless she was in the family. And again, this is first century rules, not mine, not our rules in this church. But this is how it worked in the first century. A slave girl did not talk to someone like Peter, who would have been a fisherman owning essentially his own business. And if she were a slave girl, she was most likely from another group. She may not have been a Jewish person, which a non-Jew wouldn't have talked to a Jew. A Jewish person definitely wouldn't have talked to them. So you see the issue. I'm trying to set the standard and the stage for what's going on. She doesn't ask him a question with regard to a work, and therefore she surprises him. She wasn't saying, "Sir, can I clean that up for you?" which is what you would have assumed that she would have been doing. She goes to verse 70. Again, she goes to verse 69. Again, a woman in that day was not to be confrontational with a man, yet God uses this servant girl out of her stasis of life to ensure that she can wake up Peter a little bit. Look at verse 70. Here's what he says. He denied in front of everyone, "I don't know what you're talking about." Again, if anybody, he didn't have any reason to say, "I don't know Jesus." He could have said, "Get away from me. Who are you to even talk to me?" This is first century. These are the rules. He probably could have dealt with her and her master and said, "Who is this person? Fire this person," or censure her in a serious way. "She should not be talking to me." Yet this, and I always make him out to be big, 6'5", 250. He's big, strong Peter. He's probably a short guy. He's usually the short guys, small guys are the meanest. He's probably a little guy, but I always make him out to be huge. You got this little bitty servant girl. Maybe not that big, but who knows? And yet he's so scared of her. Peter denies Christ, and not in front of the emperor or someone he should fear. Yet this little nothing lady. First century rules. He had an unexpected fear, but it shows how powerful approval can be. You understand what I'm saying here. Of any one of these he could have gotten through well, that should have been the one. "Get out of here, kid, you bother me." That kind of a thing. But no, he doesn't. Again, he had an unexpected fear, but it shows how powerful this fear can be. This small little girl, if we're going to make her out to be that way, got him all scared. Is that what happens to you? Are you not even strong enough to stand up for the little things? The tiny things that really don't matter. In society, she had no future, no hope, no standing. He didn't even have to look at her. He probably could have had her killed just for dealing with it because of the rules and the way she broke societal rules at that time. But we see how even an unexpected fear can, oh my goodness. No, I love Jesus. I don't love Jesus. I hate him. He's worst. Get away from me, please. Let's talk about the understandable fear. So we see he failed the first one unexpectedly. Shouldn't have failed it. That should have been the easy test. The understandable fear, a group comes to him next. This guy cannot get a break. Verse 71. When he had gone out to the gateway, another woman saw him and told those who were there, "This man was with Jesus the Nazarene." Once again, the ladies are all over him. Ladies, you're always tough. When you have something on your mind, I love it because you're not going to hide it. Guys will, okay, let's see if we can massage this a little bit. Ladies, right there in the middle of the eyes. You're poking me in the eyes with whatever is important to you. I know I've got my wife with tiny little bony fingers just always getting at me all the time. Not afraid of me at all. I need to instill a little bit good fear somehow because I don't have it. But he can't catch a break. He's harangued by a woman and then accused by a group. So it's kind of up the antes a little bit. maybe he was just the first one surprised, and maybe this next one he'll be doing a little bit better with. But no. And again, he denied it with an oath. I don't know this man. This kind of reminds us of our teenage years. They want you to do something. You may or may not do it. Hopefully you didn't. But all of us have been in those teenage years. You can remember it. You know, I think a lot of who I am is because of the groups that dealt with me when I was an adolescent. They manipulated me and poked at me enough to make me want to be something I'm probably not. I should be probably a lot happier than I am. Yet the pressure isn't limited to the teenage years, but to live in the workplace and non-church life. Again, you may have an important job where you're having to wine and dine different people. What are you willing to do to get that contract? What are you willing to do to move up the ladder? Again, what are you watching? What are you being part of? It's amazing things you'll go to is that someone kind of says, hey, let's go do this thing, than you would have ever done on your own. Luke 14, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, Luke really goes on to the full extreme of making sure everybody understands what we need to hate. Yes, and even with his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Those ought to be the ones you should be influenced by, and he's saying they don't matter. If you cannot just stay focused on God the Father, none of these other things matter. Peter's fear of the group is inexcusable. He should have been man enough to stand up. But it's understandable. Again, we can kind of understand it. It's inexcusable. He shouldn't have done it. But at this point, he goes beyond. He doesn't just say, I don't know who this Jesus is. He makes an oath, which is one of the worst things you could do because God talks about making an oath in His Word. They would have done something like, I swear by the King I never did that. That's the concept of an oath. Or if they really wanted to get serious, I swear by God the Father, I did not do this. We don't know what he said or what his oath was. But he was not just saying, I deny it, but I'm going to go above and beyond anything that will get you off my back. Look how weak he's gotten. This man that we make out to be the start of the church. Look where he was. And if anything, it gives us hope. No matter where you are today and what foolishness you've done, there is hope that great things can be done through your life. God can use even Peter. But look at this talking about oath, Matthew 5. But I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, don't take an oath at all, either by heaven, because it is God's throne. And he goes on to speak about the oaths a little bit more. Peter's getting farther from where he should be, and it happens easily. And it starts small, and it grows. You know, it's amazing how you look at your life and you say, I'm doing all these things. You can probably look back to the thing where it started. What's the one thing that happened at one point that you said, oh, okay, I'll do that thing. And then all of a sudden I'll do 2 things and 5 things and 10 things. Just stand up and be strong. It's time to be a man, time to be a woman, and disregard what the world says because it just doesn't matter. It's not a pastor speaking at this point. This is a guy who's walked it. I've seen God walk with me through crazy things. And at this point, I've got nothing better to do than say, God, you're the one. I'm going to follow you. Because I've seen what you've done with me. This is the life you've given me. You've done great things in spite of my foolishness and stupidity. Look how much you love me. I'm willing to stand up. Take it, give me pain. So let's continue on. We've talked about the other 2. Let's talk about the last one, the unsurprising fear. The next group's the most threatening and the least surprising. This is the one he should have been afraid of at the beginning, yet the other 2 he failed pretty well. When the Jewish leaders came to Gethsemane to arrest Jesus, armed soldiers accompanied them. We remember that if we backtrack back to the garden, that beautiful scene of Jesus weeping over the future of his people. Yet at this point, we remember, what did Peter do in the garden? Anybody remember? Sure. What happened? He's got a sword at one point. Now he's afraid of a little girl. Again, we remember he cut somebody's ear off at this point, soldiers. Peter was a fisherman, not a soldier, but he wasn't afraid then. What happened? Again, my always question is, where did the sword come from? Why does a fisherman carry a big old sword around? But that's something you can wrestle with another point. Yet he was willing to risk his life at this point by fighting for Jesus. Maybe so Jesus can get away. Okay, Jesus, I'm going to take him. You go on. Just head through the trees. I've got you. Okay, here we go. 2 feet back there, Jesus. There are the trees. I've got them right now. Jesus, the trees are right there. Turn around. Go through there out of here so I can take care of you. You see what he's trying to do? Maybe. If you want to rewrite this story. Who knows what he was doing? He could have been just doing something stupid. But maybe he had some noble, valiant cause to get Jesus out of there. Again, but let's get back to this time where he's denying. He's at the courtyard of the high priest, and he is now at the center of attention. And this man says, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" The man has seen Peter with Jesus. There's no doubt at this point. He probably knew that Peter's the one who chopped off this guy's ear. If you read in the John passages, it kind of alludes that there may have been a connection between the person who lost the ear and this character. It may be. Peter was confronted by a servant girl and then by an anonymous group. Now he's being attacked by someone who really has an agenda to kind of take out a little pain on him because of what he's done to maybe his buddy. Yet Peter stuck to the lie. This time he cursed and swore an oath. Yeah, wow. He's really being emphatic. I don't know this Jesus. I don't know Jesus, blankety, 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 blank, and I swear on God the Father and his king here on earth of Rome that I didn't do this thing. What's happened to him? How did he get there? You see, though, this is what happens in life. It's that one little thing that we do that one time, that one line we walk over, that all of a sudden there are no more lines at that point. We can easily justify everything else as we go. Peter should have remembered the words of Jesus. John 15, "If the world hates you, understand that it hated me before it hated you." Peter did not internalize these words, and therefore the crowd affected him. We shouldn't be afraid of crowds, guys. Again, understand that the world is against us. I've been plenty of times where I've done secular things to help people out or something. I'll never tell. I don't go to the gym and tell anybody I'm a minister because they separate me out all day long. I don't tell them. I just be myself, being a guy at the gym, and they immediately separate you because you just don't speak about the same things. You don't look at the same things the same way. The things they're important to them aren't important to you. You know that if you've been in those worlds and tried to live a Christ-like life, and that's why it's so tough. Because you say, I'm just sick of being separated out. I want to be accepted once in a while and not have to walk this hard road. But it's the road less traveled that's the one that's most important. 1 Peter 3:15, "Always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for you a reason for the hope that's in you. Therefore, you will be separated out, and because of that separation, be ready to talk about him." Let's look at the second point here. We've talked about the reality of fear. Let's talk about the reasons we fear disapproval. Now, understand I'm going to finish this next week. It's just too big. All of us are affected by it one way or another, and I've got to get to the end of this thing next week. But I want to set the stage this week. The fear of disapproval can be unexpected, understandable, unsurprising, or maybe all of the above. And those are the dynamics by which we live, but what are the causes? Again, essentially, the first one, we're filled with ourselves. Let's just be honest. Be straightforward. Understand who you are. You think about you more than you think about God. Therefore, everything about me matters. I really do get frustrated when I hear, "Have it your way" all the time. You know, every commercial's, every burger, I can't buy a taco. I really just want them to give me a taco. I don't want 800 choices on my taco. Just put it on my plate, let me eat it because I'm hungry, and let me go home. I don't want to sit. My wife knows it. I don't order at restaurants. I say, just pick whatever you want. I don't care. I don't want to read through a menu. She knows. She says, you've got all these degrees, and yet you want pictures for your menu. I just look at a picture. I want this picture. I don't want to read the words. Okay, that's who I am. I have no trouble being honest with you on that. I don't want to read all of it. I don't want to think about it. It just doesn't matter to me. There are bigger fish to fry out there, but we're filled with ourselves. It's clear from the biblical record that Peter was full of energy, optimism, boldness, outspokenness, and confidence. He's the kind of guy that would have thought, my opinion matters and everybody needs to hear it. You know that? Again, have you ever met someone like that? I've met a lot of them in the church. They think because they're Christians, they have the right to say whatever they want at any point in the world of the universe because God told me to do it. I think the bigger thing, sometimes God told us to learn how to keep our mouth shut. I think that's the biggest of the goals that we can all learn sometimes. That will probably keep us out of a lot of trouble. It doesn't happen too much here. There's a lot of sweet people here, but I've been in churches where the more they give, the louder they tend to speak. It's not here. I love that about you guys. But we remember Peter rebuking Jesus for saying he was going to die in Jerusalem in Matthew 16. Peter jumped right into the water when he saw Jesus on the seas. Boom, there's Jesus. Let's go. This is the kind of guy he is. He boasted of never denying Jesus, and he did. Peter was full of pride of himself. He had the ability to make things happen because he was strong and active and had probably had a clear mind. He needed to learn there's no place for pride or self-sufficiency in the kingdom of God. So that may be your downfall right now. You're just so happy with you. Please understand there's a lot of intelligent people in this room, but you're not the smartest people out there. As long as you can get that in your head, maybe you can move on with life. There's a lot of great people in here. But there's probably somebody more talented, somebody smarter, higher IQ, more degrees somewhere. When you understand that your only value comes from God the Father, none of the rest of these things matter. And then at that point, you're not in competition with anyone else. So stop being filled with yourself. But the second thing here, we fail to pray. Please look right now at your life and see how many minutes you spent before God the Father in prayer last week. There are 168 hours in a week. We're supposed to give 10% of whatever it is to God. Did you give 16.8 hours? Hand up. Yeah. Maybe you have the fear of raising your hands. Maybe that's what it is. Probably not. I would even have to ask, did you spend 1 hour in prayer this week? Not even 1%. People who depend on themselves rarely need to pray. Jesus, just after Jesus said Peter would deny him, he asked him to sit in the garden and pray. You remember that story? What was the one thing he couldn't do? What he kept doing? He kept falling asleep. Jesus knew this big thing in his life, he needed to go through it. It humbled him greatly. You can guarantee he was not the same Peter after he understood who he was than he was before. But Jesus said you need strength. You need to pray. Prayer is the only way to ward off temptation. Prayer is an admission, a confession of dependence. It involves a recognition that we cannot do this thing called life alone. It's the only way to maintain a state of dependence upon God. When you have that connection with Him, you have the ability to see His heart, and you recognize how far yours is off from His. At that point, maybe you can get it all lined up back up. Again, if Paul could have spoken to Peter, I would have loved. Now, they wrestled a lot in the book of Acts. I love that book. Such a great book. He would have reminded him that maybe we need to go through certain things. Look at 1 Corinthians 10. So whoever thinks he can stand must be careful not to fall. The first time you think you're the strongest one around, the first time God's going to take you out at the knees. He's done it to me plenty of times. Well, I'm going to provide for myself. I'll go do this. I need more money. Takes me out at the knees. I will provide for you the way I choose to take care of you. You are mine. I have sacrificed for you. You will listen. He's humbled me a lot. I was a lot more arrogant years ago. You may think I've not learned anything. We fail to pray. We function in the energy of the flesh. How do we know Peter was walking in his own energy? Remember back in the garden, he pulled a sword on the high priest's party. Yet they hadn't attacked Jesus. They just kind of meandered in. Hey, there's Jesus right there. Slash. There was no real fight at that point. Peter went on the offensive, making an unprovoked attack with some sword he found somewhere under a tree. He had not listened to Jesus, had he not, for the previous 3 years. Matthew 5. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other. Luke 6. If anyone hits you on the cheek, offer the other also. And if anyone takes away your coat, don't hold back your shirt either. John 16. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. For those of you who believe this all should be beautiful because you're Christian, please read John 16:33. Be courageous. I've conquered this world that you're having to wrestle through. What happened to those? John didn't ever talk to John. Peter didn't talk to John or Paul. Jesus rebuked Peter, saying, anyone who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Jesus had angels that would have fought for him. Yet Peter ran off in his own flesh and did something Jesus didn't ask him to do. He had a whole bunch of these big, burly angels ready to come down and make a mess of this world. And he held them off. No, I need to go through this for my people. If we depend on our own flesh for victory, we will be intimidated by those whose flesh seems stronger than our own. Yet when we live in God's power and His Spirit, we see the fleshly attacks against us as wimpy. Again, that's one of the neat things. The closer you walk with the Lord, the better you see all the things around you. Again, you look at Pilate, he thought he had so much power, and Jesus could have brought down 10,000 angels to solve that quickly and put him in his place. Understand who you are and the difference. You only need to be concerned with Jesus' opinion, not the world's. 1 Corinthians 3:19, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, since it's written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. We're going to finish this next week because it's too powerful, but please understand how foolish the world is.